Let me just get Dictora back. يلا دكتورة. Welcome back.
Thank
We,
you.
we really do talk a lot, huh?
So last lecture Zoom, it was 2 hours.
So what do you think the role of misinformation, the role of translators and interpreters in combating misinformation and disinformation within the country?
This is really important because Abdulaziz, a lot of like we just answered the question a while ago, a lot of people when they translate, if they do not understand the meaning, what they tend to do is say things from their own minds, basically, or just say things that they believe it's what the speaker said, and then at the end of the day, they are sharing different wrong information. If they are interpreting for a doctor, if they are translating for medical purposes, and they just understand what they understood, I mean, they just translate interpret what they understood, that can create a series of a lot of misinterpreted issue, a lot of mistakes, a lot of wrong information, and it will be, spreading slowly all over the society. So as an interpreter and as a translator, you need to be 100% of whatever you are translating. If you are translating for someone who you think is not saying the right words, then you can have a step back and say, okay, I believe this information is not right. Do you want me to still translate it or not? And then again, it backs to you as a translator and your ethics as a translator. It took me a lot of courage sometimes to just step back and say, I cannot translate. I'm sorry. I cannot interpret. I cannot translate because it's not ethical for me. Sometimes you are pushed into a corner where you have to do something that you do not like, whether you don't like it because it's not ethical, whether you don't like it because it's not, you feel it's not right. So you have to step back and say, I cannot do it. And again, you can simply say, are you sure of this information? Because I don't believe you're right. And then again, we can basically stop the misleading information that we have. It's really important that translators and interpreters understand the meaning before they go ahead and translate or go ahead and interpret. And then we have a series of flood, basically, of wrong information all over the country.
I say this a lot on Twitter and sometimes here on Instagram. I have a hashtag hire translators,
Yes.
and if more people hire translators like actual translators, trained translators, we would have so much less wrong information in the country. Like I've seen different posts back when the curfew was only a semi-curfew,
Yeah.
where the post actually said there was a full curfew like a month ago because the
Yeah.
translator failed to distinguish the الحظر الجزئي, and I think
Yeah.
الكلمة الجزئي fell from the translator, and it was we now have a curfew, and that wasn't the case. Um, so hiring actual translators, hiring people who know the process, who know how to translate, who know the theories, who know all of that, can reduce the amount of wrongful information that we're seeing every day. كمية البدليات اللي احنا نشوفها من الشركات ولا الإعلانات ولا غيرها, it really hurts a company's image to have something, whether English or Arabic, huh? Like
Exactly. Exactly.
one of the companies transliterated the company's brand in Arabic with horrible Arabic letters. It was kind of embarrassing. So we actually need translators in any company and in any establishment, not just to translate documents and whatnot, to save face. It's embarrassing when a million KD company has atrocious emails, well, it has a very weak translated website. where
Exactly, exactly.
their English website is literally Google translated rather than having a translator actually do the tabs and whatnot from scratch.
Yeah, I agree, especially Abdulaziz when this is really an international, like if it's an
Mm.
international conference or if it's an international company. And then this is basically spread all over the internet and you cannot afford it as a country that you
Hmm.
have mistakes, if I can say, because you want to appear as good as you can. And when you have a translation into English or the other way around, you can't have mistakes in regards to something that comes from the government or from an international company
Yeah.
because back again it's your image, it's whatever you're presenting to the people, so it's really important that you present the best you can. And how do you do it? Basically by hiring translators. I don't mind if you hire someone who's a bilingual and then you train them, give them workshops, translation
Yeah.
workshops, or send them abroad to learn the techniques and so on and so forth. They have to be trained to be translators, otherwise they cannot translate. Because I actually saw this when I taught translation in the UK, and I've seen a lot of people who would just take the text, put it in Google Translation, and then type it. And no, seriously. And what they do is, okay, this doesn't make sense. I will fix it. This doesn't make sense. I'll fix it. And to them, that's the way to do it because Google helped me translate, and then I'm just gonna fix it for Google. No, you don't Google Translation. You don't fix Google Translation because Google Translation is just wrong. So again,
Uh,
that's one of the mistakes that we have, one of the problems that we have when it comes to translators. They use Google Translation and they mess up the whole thing. And I actually saw that happen in front of my eyes, not just in the UK, in Kuwait as well. Because I remember I had an assignment and it was Eid and I was really busy and I couldn't do it. So it was just one paper. And I gave it to a very popular store, not store, an office here in Kuwait to translate it for me. And luckily, I'm that person who always checks whenever anyone gives me something. And I checked it, and it was really pricey. I mean, what I paid for them for that service,
mm.
and it was Google Translation. Like I wouldn't even at 5 out of 10. It's just horrible. People really need to understand that translation is not, it's a career. It's something that you need training for. It's something that you need to study for. There are translation services. There are translation theories. You need to be aware of all those so you can be a translator. You cannot just mufagir. You can't just be a translator out of nowhere. It's impossible. I think we have.
أنا أثني على كلامك دكتورة. In regards of training, I wish like I was going crazy trying to look for training for translation and interpreting back when I was in my job, and there was none. I wasn't sent to train. I wasn't sent to take a workshop. I literally almost everything that I know about translation, interpreting, and even lexicography, like with the dictionary and whatnot, I know from Dr. Muhammad bin Nasser, Dr. Shamla Jnai, Dr. Layla Al-Malih. Dr. Saad bin Tifla taught me a lot of lexicography. Dr. Muhammad taught me a lot of translation theory. Dr. Shamlan taught me a lot of English language and how the language works and how the language translates. Dr. Layla Al-Malih taught me everything I know about interpreting. All of this happened outside of the classroom. It's because
Yes.
I have the luxury of knowing them and I have the luxury of being that friend that calls and asks them questions and أحن عليهم and mashallah Allah حفظهم. They were very much willing to help and they were very much mentoring me for a while. But I lacked the structure of a classroom. I lacked the structure of having somebody who's actually teaching me something and I can have some sort of feedback. A lot of time I get some of my followers here, they're like, can we translate something, send it to you and you can give us feedback. I'm like, I would love to do that, but it's a very big time commitment. Like
It is. It
unless
is.
unless we're doing some sort of project or some sort of collaboration, it's almost impossible because it's a full-time job to be an editor, like a language editor, and you're doing it right now, Dictora.
It's actually work, Aziz, believe it or not. When, like, I remember I had a project of 200 words to translate a legal document for the Syrian government when I was in the
Mm-hmm.
UK. And that document was really confidential. And the person who translated it was translating the Arabic text into English. And the translation was horrible. It was full of mistakes. It was just wrong, like wrong structure, wrong English use of language. And when I had to actually look at it, because it was confidential, they didn't want anyone to look at it and translate it. So they chose someone from their own party. And I was given the actual chance to do it. And they said, we need you only to edit it. So I looked at it, and then it was a 200-page document. So I looked at it, and then I called him, and I remember saying this exact sentence: I cannot do it unless I'll do it from the scratch, because it was horrible. And the amount of time you need to actually do to fix someone else's language, it takes more effort and time rather than me just sitting down and doing the job myself. And that's what I ended up doing. I deleted the whole document and I just did it myself, because a lot of people do translate differently than how you think. I wanted to say something a little bit ago. Even when it comes down to studying language, we have a question from Ghadir. I swear I'm going to get back to this, but just give me 1 second because I don't want to lose the point. When you go to study translation, believe it or not, you have translation of literal text, literature, translation of legal text, and translation of medical text. So even when you study translation, you have different fields, because translation as it is uses different approaches to translate text. And when you translate literature text, it's different than when you translate a medical or legal text, just as well as interpreting. We have a whole master degree that's called interpreting in conferences. It's a whole year just studying how to interpret in a conference. We have a whole year of interpreting simultaneously or consecutively. So back again, once you have a certain type of translation, you have a certain type of approach. You have a certain theories that you need to follow, a technique that you need to follow. And all of that you learn when you study that type of translation that you like. Sign me up for Literature House. Ghadir is asking about the جمعية المترجمين, and if we have a ترجمة نادي ترجمة translation club, basically interpreter club. I think Abdulaziz and I were discussing this earlier, and we wanted to do something like a club related. Inshallah, we will. Corona. We wanted to do that. We wanted to do a workshop like interpreting too. We wanted to do translation too, but unfortunately Corona stopped all of our plans. Inshallah, after Corona, we will give you the details for that. I believe there is a translation society, but it didn't see light yet. I don't know anything about that. So,
the last update I have in regards of Jamaat Mutarjimin is that it's still pending. Like, there's some legal issues. By legal issues, I mean the members have to clear all their backgrounds and whatnot. We've all submitted and resubmitted our documents to the necessary governmental bodies, and we're just pending. Establishing a nonprofit in Kuwait takes a lot of time, because we're like 50-something founding members, and they have to do a background check on each and every one of us, and they had to do it, I think, 3 times so far. We're doing something, we're trying, and in the meantime, like especially Tala Esma, we're trying to do these kind of events as much as possible. We're trying to tweet as much as possible. We're trying to spread the knowledge that we have as much as possible. I believe knowledge that is not spread dies, and I don't want any knowledge to die. Plus, ajr balash, ilm al-nafi. So even you, I think Ghadir asked, even you or anybody in this live feed, you can relay these messages, you can send these videos, you can do whatever you want to do. Every little bit helps. So don't just wait for a society or a club. If you want something, you personally have to start it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll relay this to the day that I wished الأرض تنشق وتبلعني. It was a translation. An interpreting session that gave me most of the gray hairs I have today. Imagine, imagine sitting in a room with world leaders, without naming names, and having to interpret to 4 or 5 world leaders, in addition to a lot of MPs and ministers and whatnot. That was a time where I had the most self-doubt in myself and in my ability and in my language that I've ever had. And I do believe we have to share those stories too. Like, we can't just be like, it's a fun field, it's good, it pays a lot. Simultaneous interpreting does bring with it a lot of fear, does bring with it a lot of depression, does bring with it a lot of doubt and self-doubt. In one of my trips, I was in Denmark, I think. We were an official delegation, and I was there. I was interpreting to the accompanying MPs within the friendship group. And my superior back then corrected my interpreting, and he stopped me mid-interpreting, and he corrected something I was saying. And if you're seeing this, never do that again. He corrected me on a small technicality, and yes, I was wrong, but it didn't affect the text. And this was me 6 months in the job. It was probably my second or third trip. And he corrected me, and he was like, okay, كمل. I could not do anything after that. He had to step in and interpret the whole day, Jazakallah khair. But that self-doubt stuck with me for like a year.
Yeah.
For the next year, I was like, what if I interpret wrong? The best advice I was given in that regard, it was probably by Dr. Muhammad Nasser, is in interpreting, you will be wrong. You will make a ton of mistakes. As long as the information goes into the target as closely as possible, you're good. You've done what you had to do.
Exactly.
I personally have faced anxiety. I personally have had panic attacks with simultaneous interpreting.
Yeah.
But like I would literally be like in a different country with people I don't know, surrounded by interpreters I haven't met, and the people I have to interpret to are basically Majlis Umma al-Kuwaiti and Majalis Umma al-Duwal al-Thaniya. That was scary. That was intimidating. I'm a 20-something-year-old guy sitting in a booth interpreting the most influential discourse in the world without much practice. So I would be like this just before the session. I would be sweating. I would be scared, shaking. Of course, I think Dr. Asma would agree. You don't eat before an interpreting session.
You don't drink.
I used to have my water in front of me, and I would sip it, not drink it. And I would be like literally shaking until I step into the booth. I have my headphones in, and as soon as I click go, I just go. Everything goes away. I don't have the luxury of being scared. I don't have the right to be scared at that moment. Because I said yes, because I agreed to be on this mission, I'll do it. There is no I can't. There is no I'm scared. I agreed to it, therefore I am liable.
Yeah.
Then there are a lot of horror stories. There's one, feel free to interrupt me, Dr. and you guys can still ask questions. I remember probably my last trip. We were in an assembly in a Gulf country, but there had to be an interpreter, and I was there. And I have a rule: I will never go to any interpreting session alone. Yeah. You have to bring a second interpreter, even if they're like not a lead interpreter. They can be a junior. I don't mind.
Yeah.
But you have to get me an interpreter, and
exactly.
that's the least anybody can ask for.
Yeah, because sometimes it's just caution. You cannot go on.
I can't. Like, I've done 12-hour sessions, but I was coughing blood afterwards, and that's not fun. So I go there and I meet the interpreter. He was one of the Arab nationalities, and I sat with him, and I'm like, we as interpreters have to have as clear of a language as possible. So no accent in your English and no accent in your Arabic.
Yeah.
You have to be as close to standardized language as possible. And he was like, don't worry about it. I got this. I was like, cool. He was also like an older gentleman in his late 50s, early 60s, maybe. So I thought, yeah, I'm in good hands. He'll take care of this. He's probably better than I am. I asked him, do you have simultaneous interpreting experience? And he was like, no, but I've worked for so and so for the past 10 years in consecutive interpreting. I told him, but consecutive interpreting is entirely different than simultaneous interpreting. It's an entire different field. It's an entire different world. Like,
Different techniques.
It's different techniques. It's different a lot of things. And he was like, don't worry. I want this to be a rizqah. So I thought, okay, they brought him. They probably know what they're doing. So we go into the session, and I start interpreting for like an hour and a half, waiting for him to step in, like be the chivalrous guy, and you've done a lot, khalas, I'll step in. But he never did.
Yeah, yeah.
So at some point, like I needed to cough, and I pressed stop. I went out of the room to cough, because you never cough in the room, even if your mic is not on, because your partner's mic is on. And the guy was literally interpreting like this, eyes closed, hands on his cheeks. وقال ثم يكون. And that's just wrong. And I'm not making fun of the guy. It was his choice to say yes to this. If you can't do it, don't do it. Because the day
you can't, say no.
Say no. Because what he did, the second day in the morning meeting, like the closed meeting, the executive committee meeting, they filed the world leaders in the session filed an official complaint against the Arab interpreters. And I was interpreting to my superior with smiles on my face, because I know I did a good job. I know whatever this complaint was, it wasn't on me. Because كانوا يقولون الكويتي ترجمت زينة بس الثاني ما يعرف. So it's a lot of these scary little things. Practice makes perfect, and I do believe that, and I still practice today, even though I'm not a practicing interpreter anymore. But it's like a muscle.
Yes.
If I ask you to help me pick up my car and move my car, you have to lift up my car and move it down the road. Would you say yes? If you have the body for it, by all means. If you don't have that muscle trained enough, you can't do it. There's no shame in saying no to it. So it's your responsibility, and انت ما تفشل نفسك, ما تفشل وفدك. What's happening right there is you're assisting in furthering the discourse between a lot of people.
It's actually sorry, go ahead.
No. Step in.
It's actually a very important thing is you need to realize two important things. You will pick up someone else's slack, because if someone is suddenly stuck, you need to actually step in, turn on your mic, and be like, okay, I got it. You turn off your mic and you go ahead and continue, because sometimes people are just stuck. This is number one. Number two, you need to actually feel that there is someone that will be there for you when you need them, because sometimes there is a new word, and that new word occurs a lot, and you need to actually say it. So the first time you say it wrong, and then that person should actually help you get the right word, and then write it on a piece of paper, and so you can actually say it later on. Because believe it or not, you do have a lot of things that will just go right at the top of your head. That's being said, the person next to you should actually help you, and not just sit there and be like, no, they should actually help you. And another thing is, you as an interpreter, you should not interpret more than 30 minutes. You need to make this clear beforehand and during the interpreting session, because you will eventually affect your mental health. And it happens a lot of times. And it did happen to me personally just a few months ago. I was, even when you go somewhere and you're working and people know that your background, like now I'm an assistant professor of English. I work in a university. I do not actually interpret or translate. So if you want to ask me to interpret or translate, this is another job. You're going to have to, not just money wise, you just have to actually give me the opportunity to work in my field. We were attending a conference or an orientation, and that orientation lasted for 1.5 hours. People do not understand English. Okay, we need an interpreter. Dr. Asma, come here, interpret. Yalla. Okay. I was actually exhausted because I was working on something all day long. I was there. I was like, okay, I have to do it. Obviously, qasban alay. I was like, okay, yalla, let's go ahead and do it. I was interpreting, and then I'm looking, and there is another person. Like, it was actually a sequence of a lot of people doing the orientation. So first we have this guy, and then we have this guy, and I was looking, and I'm like, am I going to interpret for all those people? Yes.
Yep.
And I actually had to. And you reach a point where you're just not interpreting anymore. Like, yeah. So yeah, because you're exhausted. You're exhausted mentally. You're exhausted. Your body is exhausted. Even your mouth and your vocabulary are lost, and your ability to understand and reproduce is even less than how it was. So always have the guts basically to say, sorry, I cannot go more than 30 minutes, or just stop and be like, I can't go more than 30 minutes. But unfortunately, a lot of employers, a lot of people do not understand that. Just like how they would hire anyone who's bilingual to actually translate and interpret, they would hire anyone or just ask anyone to do that. And it happened with me and Abdulaziz. There was a conference and someone asked us to interpret, and I suggested that we go, both of us, and they were like, no, it's only 1 day conference. We only need one interpreter. And I was like, what do you mean 1 day? I cannot. I never. I'm not Jungar. I cannot just go on all day and interpret for a whole day. That's like 4 or 5 hours of talking, because you will have one person talking, delivering their presentation, and let's say that's 2 hours. Okay, maybe I can do that. Then another person for 2 hours, then another person. Am I going to interpret for all those people? I'm a human after all. It's not a machine. So you need to say, I cannot do it. You need to say that.
أول شيء بس حاب أسلم على دكتوري دكتور محمود الهاشمي. حياك الله دكتور. He said some very kind words. It was one of his students about a decade ago. And he was one of the people who taught me a lot about mass communication and media production. Probably he taught me some of the setup I have here today, like the ring lights and the mics and all of it. فحياك الله دكتور. شرفنا حضورك ويانا. I'd like to move to a sort of a self-gratifying topic. It's something I want to talk about. I've been wanting to talk about translation and technology, which was the topic of the translation conference back in Kuwait University that unfortunately had to be postponed. We're seeing a move towards technology in every field. We're seeing technical translation, technical dictionaries. If I can't, do I even have a copy here? I have one of my favorite dictionaries here. I have a couple. I have the مكنز اللهجة الكويتية البدوية قبيلتي شمر وعنزة by a very good friend of mine, an older brother rather, Dr. Muhammad Al-Anizi, and I have, where is it, the Dictionary of Idioms, I believe, by Dr. Muhammad bin Nasir and Dr. Shamlan Lajnai. These were invaluable tools. These were invaluable tools to me in my translation, but we also have things like this.
Yes.
We have things like this that weigh a ton. They're extremely useful. Like المغني الأكبر is a very important tool in any translator's arsenal, but it's not worth carrying it. It's not worth me going to an interpreting session with this. It's so a lot of people have been asking. There has to be a technological alternative to these. There has to be a more of a an online presence for a dictionary. وإن فيك أخوي بلامكو. My notebook just fell. I remember one day I was in an airplane and we were part of a delegation, and Abu Ali, like a lot of my friends are here, so I don't know if I should be happy or embarrassed.
All my friends are here too, but I'm pretending not. I don't see them because they're like.
So I was in an airplane and I had to translate a secret super rush document, and I needed my tools. My tools were back in my luggage, and I needed to translate now and on an airplane. I didn't have any of my books and I didn't have internet. So everything I did, all my translation was like from here. I was lucky enough that the translation wasn't very idiomatic. It was somewhat straightforward, but I needed something. I needed something I can have with me anywhere I go. So this personally led me to, this is one of the reasons that I did my dictionary, المكنة السياسي للمترجمين الفوريين والتحريريين. Not sure if I have a copy here. I think you can find it in my account somewhere. I did my dictionary for any translator, any interpreter who's within the realm of any sort of job, whether you're in finance or economics, or whether you're in the oil field. You're going to have to translate a document, and this book was an attempt for me to help that. It's an interpreter's dictionary, so it has like large words with bold lettering. But I wanted to do a step more, which is why I made that dictionary into a free app. That's an offline app. Like you can get it now. It's ads. It doesn't have any ads. It doesn't have anything on it. You basically download it and it works. Has 1,350 something words, but like there's a lot more we can do in regards of translation, and I'm currently working on a project with a very good friend of mine and my business partner, حمد غيث طيار. ماذا موجود. And we haven't announced much yet. But I know, like what I can say is we're working on an online, I wouldn't call it a dictionary even, I'd call it a corpus, an online corpus that has around 250,000 technical terms. And we're very excited about that, which is going to be hopefully accessible within Corona. I don't know how long Corona would be, but like we wanted to have it by April, and I think that's going to be postponed a bit. Dictora, this whole segue, even though I promoted myself a lot, in regards of online resources, we have the online resources for the translator. What do you think are the online resources for the interpreter?
Okay, so basically, there are two. I want to add on to this because there are two very important softwares that anyone can get. I believe one of them is like you have to buy it. It's called Deja Vu Translator, and basically like a corpus online for you to have all the terms. And it can also work for interpreters, because as interpreters we have our list and we always add on to it. We always add on the words that we always use and their equivalents in the other language. So this program is actually, or the software is actually like a corpus online that you just add on to it. And then you would automatically update your software to whatever words that you have. And also nice. There is another one. I've attended a conference in Dublin just last year, and they were working on a program, also a software, and it's an offline software. It's called Corpus Lingua or something. And it has, basically it has the word in English and then different translations in Arabic, in Spanish, in Italian. If you are a translator and you're a certified translator, you can just go into that software and just write down the right translation for it. And after a few days, if it's approved, they will post it. So in a way, it also helps translators to just go there and find the right word and its translation in different languages. A lot of translators are working now, and interpreters are working now on Corpus Online to basically have all the words there so they can access it anytime, anywhere. And I personally love to have my own corpus, because basically you have words and then you have the right equivalence for it. A very simple example is Israeliyin and Sahayina and how we translate it. If I was in the UK, if I'm translating or interpreting in the UK, I would say Israeliyin. However, in Kuwait, you would use the term Sahayina. So basically, when you have your own corpus online, you can actually just tick it and have two equivalents for it, like UK and for example, Kuwait translation. It's one of the most important things that we do have as translators and interpreters, because once again, you just need to go into that website or into that document or software and just Google the word and then have the equivalence for it in the other language instead of trying to remember. And I still do have the ones that I did in the UK. It's just a lot of them, and you just keep adding on to them because it's an unending thing. Some of the terms you will actually use as you're using the words that we're using now, just because you memorize them, you say them so much, but some words are very difficult and you don't even use them that much. So it depends again on the topics that you're addressing in the interpreting session.
We have a question about the best dictionary, the best type of dictionary we can use. I honestly believe there is no best dictionary we can use. It depends. Yeah, it depends on what kind of field you're in, what kind of situation you're in, how much time you have. So, like a rule of thumb you can have is I will utilize whatever resources I have to translate as fast as I can possibly translate, while maintaining the best quality I can produce. That's my rule. So if I need to go to online resources, I'm definitely going to online resources. If I have a terminological list that I've made, I will use that list. If I have a dictionary privy, I will use that dictionary. So it's not a matter of what to buy, it's the matter of what's the best type of resource I have for that situation I'm in. If I have to translate a document in 5 minutes, I'm going for Google. I'm definitely going for Google. But if I have like a month to translate a single page, I'm going to read poetry books. I'm going to read Twitter. I'm going to read everything I can possibly have, so that a dictionary, the translation I have, will be the best translation I have. Oh, Dr. Shimlan is now just joined the conversation. So Sharaj is actually one of my mentors and one of the people I told you about who taught me almost everything I know about the field. Hayakallah Diktor. This leads us to probably the closing topic of tonight's session, which is basically you guys' questions. What do you guys think about the topic at hand? What kind of questions do you have? Do you have any other questions that we have failed to answer or go through? You guys have the floor. Inshallah فيك دكتورنا. This field is so diverse. It's so big that you can do with it whatever you want and whatever you like. Yes, Nasser. It depends on the topic you have and the situation you have. If you have a literary text and you have a year to translate it, you can use whatever you want. If you have a literary text and you have a day to translate it, like Google it. You go with the fastest possible tool that's on in your disposal.
Yeah, it depends on the culture as well, because you know that we have different cultures in the world, and sometimes you don't want to offend that culture that you're translating into. So you need to translate those specific words upon the country or the culture that is acceptable or not acceptable. الله يحييك دكتور، شلونك؟ عساك بخير.
It's a lot of nuances. everybody's like we can both do political translation, but we'd have very different tools. My lexicon is
Exactly.
vastly different than Dr. Asma's lexicon. She could be better than me in regards of foreign policy, and I can be better in regards of local policy. It's whatever you're lacking that you try to search for. Of course,
Exactly.
the best translator is a translator who never opens a dictionary, but that's impossible.
That's
We're not
impossible. No.
machines. Yeah, that's impossible. You can't measure your quality as a translator by how many words you know, because you might not know how to memorize or utilize those words.
It's very important also to be aware of one thing. You cannot be mistaken as a translator unless of course you go beyond the norm, but there is very important thing that we can actually disagree upon one term. Like for example, if I'm translating a text and Abdulaziz is translating the same text, me and him can come up with a different translation, especially if it's a text within a sentence and lexical items and structure and all of that. It depends again on the linguistics beauty of the language, of the text, of how I look at it, how I want to interpret it, how I want to translate it, how I want to reproduce it in another language. And Abdulaziz as well, he wants to do this thing, he doesn't want to do that, he wants to shed light on a very important aspect in the text, and so on and so forth. So again, it depends on you as a translator, on your background as a translator, on your knowledge of the target text audience, the culture itself, the terminology that you have. Maybe my terminology is different than his terminology, and so on and so forth, which is also one of the most important things that we see in the very easy thing is a Quran translation. You look at it and then everyone says something else because it depends on how I understand the text and then how I reproduce it. Because maybe someone will say something, one simple statement, I will understand it a different way than Abdulaziz and how we understand it. And that's one of the main reasons a lot of translators translate different things in different ways.
Yeah. We have a question on how can I start a career as a translator interpreter. What do you think, Dictora?
Sorry, what was the question? Let me go. How to build up a career as a translator and interpreter? Okay, so basically, I think you have better options abroad. Sorry, because for a simple fact is that in Kuwait we don't appreciate translators and interpreters as a profession. We look at it as someone who's bilingual and he can do 2 languages. That's wrong. So what you can do is try to hi salam so
تنطرني بالصالة؟ Okay. Sorry, Dictora.
No, it's all right. Don't worry about it. Corona again. So basically, what I was saying is you can actually find a job as a translator. Try to improve and develop your skills by yourself, by interpreting, selling yourself, by actually joining all the conferences that we have. We have an annual translation conference in Kuwait University now. Always attend that, participate, and someday you might be actually an influencer in the field, especially in Kuwait. We are trying. I'm actually struggling to find people in Kuwait who are really interested in translation, and again to have a translation society, to have a translation club, and to advertise translation and translators and interpreters as people who studied this as profession and not just simply someone who knows 2 languages and can be a translator. Also, we have a lot of conferences in Qatar. We have a lot of conferences in Oman. We have a lot of conferences in Saudi Arabia. All of those conferences has to do with translating, translators' skills, training for translators and interpreters. Join a workshop, join a lecture online. We have a lot of lecture. Speaking of which, I have an online lecture tomorrow. It's like a series of online lectures on Zoom. I wanted to say that because last time I did the Zoom lecture and it was very fruitful. It was amazing. A lot of people participated and the discussion was just amazing. And we have one tomorrow, inshallah, Sa'a 10, Kuwait time. It's basically to discuss the analysis of the text before we do the translation. It's just very simple. I always believe if you want something, you will be able to do it. Like I said before, I was not a translator. I was very fond of translation. I was in love with translation and interpreting. I studied English language and literature. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go to the UK and study translation and interpreting. And that's what I did. And now I'm a professional translator and an interpreter. So back again, it's what you want. If you want to do it,
Mm.
you can just go for it. And we guys are lucky. We have everything online. You can
Yeah.
study online. You can attend lectures online. You can study and have books and theories online. So that's one of the most important things that we do have.
Uh,
Translation of theories. What do you think? Any
uh,
simple strategy?
if you don't mind, I'll start with that, Dictora. Dr.
Okay, yalla,
Shamlan,
go.
Dr. Shamlan is asking translation of euphemisms. What do you think? Any simple strategy? Give us an example. In regards of translation of euphemisms, there's this book by a couple of people I know. I think it's literally called Translation of Euphemisms and Dictionary of Translation of Euphemisms by a couple of very brilliant PhDs, Dr. Mohammed bin Nasser, Dr. Shamal Ajnai. That's my
Thank
first
you for
resource.
the copy, by the way. I have a copy, Dr. Bani.
That's the first approach. I have my copy, I think, in my office,
Yeah,
and
me too.
that's the first strategy. The second strategy is actually calling one of them and asking them how to translate that euphemism. A notable example is an example. The way I learned this from Dr. Mohammed bin Nasser is kick the bucket. Can you translate kick the bucket as like a subtle? Of course not, because you're missing the point. A euphemism is relayed in a manner to lessen the severity of the context. So the way I translate kick the bucket, it can be from as formal as توفاه الله ولا أخذ الله من نيته into you know
شات
شات all the way to mutt. So it depends on the way you want to translate it, and that's something I actually learned from Dr. Shamlan and Dr. Mohammed bin Nasser. It's a lot of little things. Dr. Asma, myself are very different translators, are very different interpreters. We both have different approaches to almost everything. And that's the beauty of the field. That's the beauty of and the vastness of the field of translation.
Exactly.
And I say translation, of course, it also includes interpreting, it includes subtitling and dubbing and all of that. So even if you're not a trained translator, even if you don't have a BA in English or translation or whatnot, you can still be a translator if you have the language, if you have sorry, but we have lost. Yeah, you did lose the intimacy. You can go with something like birds of a feather flock together, but that's for to give a concise translation that also has an idiom. I would go with said dictionary. But for now, talking live on Instagram with this immediacy rather than idiomacy, I would go with something similar. But again, I will use your personal example of birds of a feather flock together. There's some similarities there. Equivalent translation is amazing. It's a reflection of high-level translation. It's an example of amazing interpreting and natural sounding discourse. But you need the right tools for the job.
Exactly.
It's like I was saying, it's a vast field. It's everything you want to do with it. If you want to be a translator of music lyrics for some reason, you can do that. I've translated different poems back before I became a professional political translator. You can translate novels, you can translate, you can do something as amazing and important as what Dr. Asma said in translating the Quran and Quranic texts. But it's very different from each person to person. It's very different from what you guys are interested in, and there's no right way or wrong way to do it, or no right way or wrong way to decide what kind of translator you want to be, as long as you try to further this field as best you can. I'll close the session by asking you to do one simple thing. لا التحويل البريطاني دكتور تأثير دكتور شملان الجناعي، لأن عرفتي شلون؟ فدكتور شملان ساعات يحول شوية باللهجة. So what I was trying to say is I have a simple request from you guys, and that is try to translate any document or any tweet or anything that would be beneficial to us as a community in regards of this pandemic. Try to translate basically any information that you'd find relevant, whether on Twitter, on Instagram, on however you want to spread it. Volunteer yourself as a translator to the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Commerce, whatever you can, because in this pandemic we do suffer from misinformation. So whatever you can do, however you can help, it would be of benefit to our society. Dr. Asma, you have the mic.
I just want to make sure that anyone have last questions before we conclude. We have 5 more minutes. I mean, we exceeded the time, but I just want to give them the 5 more minutes that we have. If not, then all I can say is I don't know why you always have one eye up and one eye down.
It's my style.
I know, I noticed. But yeah, as an interpreter, as a translator, I advise you to just work on yourself by yourself. So just go ahead and educate yourself. Have a very good chance now of a lot of online lectures all over the world throughout different platforms like Zoom and Skype and so on. Join these lectures, join online conferences, educate yourself by reading. We have a lot of books online. We have a lot of conferences. Participate in conferences because it will help you. And once you actually given your research and present it to people, people will ask you a lot of questions. These questions can open up your mind and ideas for other research. And always work on yourself, because there is no one who is willing to help you as much as yourself. And I really hope to see everyone tomorrow in the online lecture. And
follow Dr. Asma, because she's one of those invaluable resources you may have within the field. So if you follow me, by definition, by default, you have to follow Dr. Asma now. That's an order, not a request. يعطيك العافية دكتورة، يعطيكم العافية اللي يسمعونا نسولف ما أدري إيش كثر. I hope you guys ما شاء الله. I hope you guys got some benefit out of this. We most likely will do something similar again. Feel free to join Dr. Asma's lecture tomorrow. Actually, it's very encouraged. إن شاء الله يحفظنا وياكم ونشوفكم إن شاء الله على خير. I'll post the videos in my account. I think Dr. will do the same. نشوفكم على خير إن شاء الله.
يعطيكم العافية.